Buenas noches, familia. Buenas noches, familia. This is your host, Ray Collazo. Thank you so much for joining us. You're listening and watching Found in Translation, the talk show that stacks truth about politics and today's hottest issues. Thank you so much for joining us again. And we're here along with my regular co-host and the perfect person to join us today on this very special edition to kick off the end of the year, not only in 2019, but get us ready for 2020. Dionelly Reyes. Dionelly, muy buenas noches, mija.
Thank you for having me. Thank you so much. I have a little cold, but I'm good.
That's all right. I think after Christmas, and I see we have our great friend Felix Montalana in the queue. We're going to get him on in a moment, so just hang tight with us, Felix. After Christmas, I think everybody's got the sniffles. Somebody's going through something, yeah, because we all partied a little too hard yesterday and the last couple of days.
That's another great thing about doing the show virtually. I don't have to, you don't have to be in contact with my germs, so you're good.
Later on in the show, we're going to hear Dionelly Reyes's top pop culture moments. We're going to talk some pop culture, have some fun with that. Later on in the show, you're going to hear some of my sports commentary. We may have one or two special guests join us later in the show. And of course, in the second segment of the show, we're going to discuss the news and political headlines impacting us in 2019, not only reviewing and kind of contemplating what took place in 2019, but really kind of getting you ready for 2020, because it's important to look backwards, but you got to keep it moving. So that's very important. And what better way to begin? And again, you can watch. We appreciate your the Facebook Live, and also on Twitter. That's watching live. You can watch, of course, you may be watching this on YouTube or as an audio podcast. Anywhere you can download a podcast. And of course, on our radio listeners, WPPMLP 106.5 FM in Philadelphia, the city that loves you back. To begin this first segment of the show, Dionelly, we have a very special guest, the founder of not only the Potencial Millonario podcast, but the Dice Audio Dice radio podcast network, and a great friend to the show, Felix Montelada's in the building.
Hey, Felix.
Felix.
Hey, can you hear me?
Get him on. Yeah, where are you there, brother?
Can you guys hear me?
We can
hear you, but we don't see you, my friend.
He's mysterious.
He's a weird one.
Uh-oh.
Oh, there. Oh, let's see.
It's dark. I have a camera on. Let me check my settings just in case.
Yeah, why don't you do that? While we're waiting for Don Felix, always great to have Felix Montalada on the show. Dionelly, this has been such a crazy year because in many respects, there's Felix.
There I am.
Felix Montalada, welcome to the show, brother.
Definitely
been too long.
my settings.
Felix, great to see you, brother. We wanted to begin the show with sort of reflecting on 2019. I think if I could just give sort of an opening statement on it, I really believe that 2019 saw not only sort of a lot of challenges for all of us on a very personal level. A lot of people are not at best of health, and there's lots of reasons for that. And it's so sad because we have the wealthiest country and some of the sickest people. And I think a lot of that comes from a lot of personal anxiety, personal stress about connecting with something bigger, whether it's wanting to be closer to family or other things que faltan en su vida, ¿verdad? And I think a lot of the stresses of our country are leading to that. But out of that comes a lot of unity and a lot of people looking to work together. And I think this Found in Translation community is a great example of that. Thinking about people like Cristina Vega with her love shirt and her campaigns, people like you, Dionelly, with your leadership, and of course, the founder of Potencial Millonario and Audio Dice Network, Felix Montalada. So a lot of anxieties, but a lot of hope for the future. Dionelly, what's your initial thoughts about reflections on 2019?
Well, it's true what you're saying, that there's like a lot of stress with that. You want to come together with your family, and you also want to excel professionally. You also want to do what's best for your community. So it's all about balance, but it's most important to not forget about yourself, and also remembering to develop yourself spiritually as well, not just, gaining more money, gaining more influence. It's about you at your core and having that connection with God, whatever your idea of God is. So that's something that keeps me going through tough times and keeps me smiling. Control the controllable and leave the rest to God.
You're right about that. And Felix, I know this has been a big year for you as you transition into a different part of your life. with your recent retirement and sort of more forays into various projects. You're always very busy. So Felix, share with people your thoughts about 2019 and what you're taking away from this year.
Well, 2019 was exceptional in many ways, but one of the really hard and really difficult situation is the immigration issue with politics and all that that's going on today. It's making our community a lot harder to not only to get around, but it's actually unified us because of that, right? So we're getting a little bit closer to each other. We're talking. I'm at a level where I'm talking to people not just about diversity, because we can check off the box at a company and we can say, yeah, tenemos un Latino, right? We have one check, but you have 1,000 employees, right? Or we have a 10% check, but you have 100,000 employees. So in my case, what I've been trying to explain to people is we have to go beyond diversity and start talking about inclusion.
Yes.
And 2019 is one of those years, it has been one of these years where reflecting back, you can see we're not really included as a community, and we have to be included. So, especially with the atmosphere today, it has gotten really, really tough for people that speak Spanish and are bilingual. You don't even have to be Latino. If you speak Spanish, you're like, oh, go back to your country.
Or have an accent, or have an immigrant background. Because we even see sometimes in our politics that people that just happen to have an immigrant background, even if regardless if they're from Europe or regardless if they even have an accent, if they have an immigrant background, somehow they could be pinned as different. Felix, you're in a unique situation because you live in the dirty South, as we affectionately say, and I would imagine as a Puerto Rican, that's right, and as someone that I would imagine your perspective as someone as a Puerto Rican, as someone that's a retired federal employee, that's very accomplished in your various careers, but seeing sort of this the changing of America in a different way. We're in sort of big city urban America, but you're sort of at it where you're at is you have a very different perspective, but a very interesting perspective that I think people should know more about.
Well, yeah, where I live it's actually outside of Montgomery, Alabama. Montgomery is the capital of Alabama, and it's where all these civil rights movement began, and where we have all this great history here. And I got to tell you, living outside of that, it's very rural. And if you think that people in major cities have it hard just because they're minorities and all this, rural America as a whole has it pretty tough. It has it really. There's actually sometimes there's no hospitals for 3 and 4 counties. And when we talk counties here, we're talking, miles, hundreds and hundreds of miles without even a hospital. And no services. You have to, if you're a veteran and you live out here, you have to travel 1.5 hours to the nearest place to go and get health. I mean, it's just the challenges are different. And seeing that, it gives me a different perspective on life. Like, it's not, I hear everybody, I grew up in a city, I was raised in a city, I worked in a city, and I've made most of my life in the city. And I got to tell you, seeing what rural America goes through, it's very challenging, and especially for Latinos. Also, I mean, if you talk about that aspect, it's even more challenging, to the point where I see people that come here, and I got to be honest with you, you won't not see Latinos during the day just at stores walking around. They're either working, and working hard, and at night you'll see a few come out. And with today's atmosphere, I can tell you, you see fewer and fewer coming out.
Interesting. Dionelli, I wanted you to chime in because if you could share with us kind of your lessons learned from 2019, first as a career woman and also as a mother, because I would imagine, and I'm a father, but motherhood's the most special identity someone can have. And I would imagine that, trying to teach your child sort of how to navigate through this world, because in some ways we're making great progress, but at the same time, there's still those challenges that Felix talking about.
Okay. Well, career-wise, what I learned was that it's good to not burn bridges. Like you could speak your mind, but be conscious of how you speak your mind, and then realize that you can't really change everything. You could plant the seed, but you can't really change everything. Like you can't, if you don't agree with someone, you could state it in a certain way, but don't keep like insisting on it until they agree. They might never agree, but you can still stand your ground and not burn bridges, and then keep it moving. When one door closes, another one opens. And as far as me as a mother, which I love, is my number one priority in the world. Is what keeps me motivated, keeps me going. Well, my son's 5 years old, but so I can't really break things down to him as when he's older. But again, it's about planting that seed, about him being confident in himself, about him being proud of being Latino. Like something the school that my son goes to, because one of my priority was to get my son into a great school district, and I thank God I was able to do that. One of the top school districts in the state. But then he's there, and he's one of the very few Latinos in the school.
Hmm.
So he doesn't want to speak Spanish. I'm like, Papi, well, speaking Spanish is a superpower. Like I try to convince him that way. But then when he's at school, who's he going to speak Spanish with? So when I'm at home, I try to speak more Spanish to him, and I know that the school isn't going to teach him about his Latino background and his history. So it's up to me to do that too. It's up to his father and I to do that.
I know Felix, as a father of a younger son yourself, I know you can relate to some of the Dionelli's challenges there.
Not only that, my wife, she's a professor at a university, and we both, when we first met, we met working together. We used to work for NASA, and as we had a kid, Nick, who's now 14, we had to make harsh decisions because sometimes the environment for work for females with kids is not as healthy as one would think. And like I battle with my wife on whether she continues to work because she wants to keep working. I'm like, oh, just retire early. I tell her because sometimes if and this isn't, I've noticed this in every profession, females would like to get a little break from the work just to like take care of the kid or kids at one time for just a while, maybe a year or two. But if you do that, you kind of damage your career.
Hmm.
And it shouldn't be like that, but it is. I mean, you don't get the advantages that other people get. Like I'm there because my wife is taking care of kids, so I can get promoted. I can do all this stuff.
Hmm.
But for a female that's working and just wants, even if you're married and you have that support, because my wife has that, it's tough. It's very tough, and we're talking in 2019. We're not
Hmm.
talking past times. Still in 2019, it's tough. If a mother wants to take a break, like let's say a 6 month break, because the kids need special attention on something,
Hmm.
there is no, very few companies would accommodate you.
Yes.
And actually, I think the federal government just passed a law where they're going to give leave. I think for mothers, they weren't giving pay leave or anything. So that's the new thing that this president actually signed as a trade off with it was a trade off with some other bill that they had going, but for mothers, I can see how hard it is. I can tell you I moved to Alabama because of that issue,
Hmm.
and even for me as a male, when I told people that the reason I was moving out of Washington, D.C. and leaving headquarters was because I wanted to give my kid a better, I'm looking for a better school district, a better life for this one particular kid. And they didn't take that well. I'll be very honest. That wasn't taken like, really? Like, you're going to do that? I mean, they were in disbelief that I was even saying that was the reason. It was like, well, you're a manager here. You just can't handle the job. And I'm like,
Mhm.
no, I really want. My wife wants to move down there, and I want to follow her, and I want my kid to be raised by family, and I'm doing that. So it's very difficult for not only especially for women working nowadays with kids. I mean, it's hard. It's very hard.
No, and again, you're listening to the Found Translation Talk Show. Dianelli, can you hear us now? Okay, let me see if I can get Dianelli on. Dianelli, can you hear us now? Okay, well, we're gonna have to. Why don't you chime in and come back on? Because I'm not sure why you can't hear us. I don't see any reason on this end of it. But while Dianelli we figure out her technical situation. Felix, I wanted to ask you, Felix, you've had quite a year with podcasting. Let people know about the latest goings on with your various podcasts and media projects, and of course, the crescendo of which is the very prestigious Latin Podcast Awards, which you're the founder of. So share with us a little information.
Well, let me tell you, Potencial Millonario is a podcast that I started as a radio show over 6 years ago, and I basically threw it on as a podcast, but it was really a radio show. And once I decided that I really wanted a podcast, I stopped putting on it as a radio show and did it totally as a podcast. And for 6 years, I've been talking about personal finance and how to get out of debt and how to have less liabilities and all that good stuff and how to make more money because that's super important in this world. And I must say that Potencial Millonario today, after 6 years, gets about, and I say about because this is up and down, but we get about 20,000 listeners a month, which is it's pretty cool. It's not a great huge, but it's not that small either. So it's a medium-sized podcast. It's all in Spanish. Everything's in Spanish. Like the episode for this week that I put out on the weekend was talking about how to save 50 and 75% on Christmas items. And I so happened to walk into the Walmart today, and sure enough, there were people just filling up a couple carts with Christmas items for next year. And I wasn't sure if those people were just reselling that later. You don't never know. But Potencial Millonario is a show that I do as a give back to the community in Espanol, in Spanish, because I did well back in the early 2000s, mid 2000s, and financially, and it wasn't with the work, it was with investments, and it was an opportunity for me to give back with that podcast. That has grown into the Audio Dice Network, which is a podcasting. It started as a podcasting network, but today it's a media network. And I say that because we produce shows now. We produce our own shows and we put them up. And when we first put them up, we don't put them up on Facebook. We don't put them up on YouTube. We put them up on Audio Dice Network. And guess what? We get people to show up, which is very cool, which means, hey, you're growing, you're established a brand. And from that brand, we decided to do the Latin Podcast Awards. And that one has been a mega hit. That is the project that I'm going.
Very
okay,
prestigious, brother. Let me tell you.
You get to the point.
People
where
know we're
like,
homies, so they're like, "Hey, can you give me a good word to the judge?" I'm like, "Well, you got to earn on your own merit."
Well, and that's the way it works. It works on judges, and I pick and choose judges internationally and from here from the United States, and it's very cool because it's so diverse in that end that I'll listen to a podcast and I go, wow, this will never win. This podcast has no chance. But then the judges love it for whatever reason and it wins, So I have no control of any of the winners. But it's really cool to actually get people involved. And the involvement that we have with the Latin podcast nominees and that community is pretty awesome. I mean, we just finished through Podcast Movement. We just did an accountability group. We just did the last meeting last week, and it went on for 90 days. And we chosen 10 people, and out of the 10, 8 showed up. Tú sabes cómo somos los Latinos, right? We say, yeah, we're gonna be there, and then I'm too busy, right? But 8 showed up, and it was very cool. We set out goals at the very beginning, and we kept at every meeting. And we had 2 meetings a month for the first 2 months, and then the last one we just had the last meeting. But at every meeting, we would say, how did you do? Did you accomplish anything? And there were people very honest there that said, look, last week I was busy. I couldn't get on the horse, you know, and
Yeah.
I couldn't continue with that. But next week I'll jump on it. So the accountability group through Podcast Movement and Latin Podcast Awards was we want to do more of that. That's the type of thing. We want to help our community grow and get the message out. There's ton of great Latinos out there that have written books, that have a story, that are like comedians. I mean, you know, even musicians that need some type of outlet that they can get to different audiences so people can get to know them. So that's through the Latin Podcast Awards. That's what we're trying to do. Audio Dice, we're trying to get, like right now we're working on a show where we're gonna go to these well-known, actually we're talking about that, Ray, with these well-known chefs. And we're gonna do a series, 7 episode with a pilot episode. And we're gonna go out there, they're gonna do one dish. They're gonna explain to us everything with, except for the secret sauces, right? No secret sauces. We're not gonna give out the family stuff there. But yeah, but we're gonna do that. That's one of those that we're really working on. We're trying to get everything ready. We're gonna start with mainly Puerto Rican type food for now, but believe me, there is out there comida venezolana, peruana, cubana, guatemalteca, pupusa salvadoreña. I mean, you name it. I mean, it's an amazing food world that we live in.
Well, Felix, I can account for that because the largest show I ever had was last week. I found the translation with Chef Gregorio from the Sabor with Love, which was one of our bangers. I'm still getting comments about it. And there was such a power in food. But what was great about that conversation was it goes beyond the recipes. It's about combining unity and family and our culture and giving back. So there's a lot of lessons that came out from me and affirmations that came out from me in last week's episode. So I always want to give love to the Sabor with Love family. The other thing, Felix, you tied into two things, and I want Dionelli to chime in on this that I wanted to share in this first segment of the show. Our special end of year 2019 celebration episode was two issues. One is that you spoke to the power of supporting one another. And one of the things that I did this year, and I've made a commitment to myself to do from now on, is I wrote down, I took some time earlier this week to write down how much I helped good friends, colleagues, associates with their dreams. And just as simple as, this $3,000 consulting contract, or having them on the show to promote their products and services, connecting them to a potential business vendor to support them. And I think we have to do more of that. And I think that's one of the things that you're doing with your platform, Felix, I think which drew us to each other because you really prioritize mentorship. And I want to ask Dionelli, as someone that's also a businesswoman, look at that. I do want to ask you about that, Felix. But someone that's a businesswoman, Dionelli, and also an author, what is I know that going into 2020, you're going to look to collaborate and support others' visions, and I know we're going to be doing the same for you. So, what's your thoughts about that portion of sort of the journey as we go into 2020, Dionelli?
My thoughts on that? Well, I really appreciate you believing in me and having me on your show, inviting me to be on your show. I really appreciate that. It's amazing to me, and you inspire me also because you lend your platform to other people so other people can speak their minds. Like, it's not just about you speaking. You want other people to share their point of view as well. So that's something that I'm looking into doing as well in the future, in Spanish, because there's a lot. It's amazing to me how many immigrants in the community, they're able to, they come to this country. For example, like my parents, a lot of people in my family, a lot of people that I know, they come to this country and they don't even learn fluent English, but they're able to succeed. So those are like the types of people that I would like to interview and have them share the point of view and be able to inspire others in that as well.
So, Felix, Dionelli is an emerging broadcaster. She's also an author. And is an excellent broadcaster in both English and Spanish. She does local radio with me. She does local radio with other commentators here locally. And and she's got a lot of different projects, La Mega, La Chelcha, a lot of platforms she's on. What is your advice, Felix, as someone that's the Don, your Spanish language podcasting, your advice to an emerging talent like Dionelli?
Well, one of the things that's really important is not only to do stuff in Spanish, but think of ratio in English, right?
Mhm.
This is the way we showcase our talents to other people that don't speak Spanish,
Mhm.
right? So Spanish is important. Yes, it's a market, and it is important because they're, like you said, there are people that come to this country, don't speak the language, and this is a way, this is another avenue for them to feel more acclimated.
Mhm.
But truth be told, what we really need nowadays is a little bit more of mainstream exposure. So if that means podcasting a little bit more in English, like
Mhm.
Ray Show is excellent for what I'm talking about here. I love Ray. I've been a fan of Ray Show forever. So
I'm humbled by that, brother. Honestly, because you are the pioneer to me.
and I gotta tell you, if you do this in English, and I've met people that, this quandrum comes up about, should I do this in English? Should I do this in Spanish? I
Mhm.
met one lady from Mexico. Actually, she's a Mexican lady. She's a PhD here in California, and she solved her problem very simple. I never heard of this solution. She has a weekly podcast that she
Mhm.
does, but the people who listen to her in English know that she's bi-weekly, and the people who listen Spanish is bi-weekly also, because she does one program in Espanol. The next week, it's the same exact program in English. The next week is
Oh,
you're right. So
okay.
she's
So a
putting out
little.
an episode every week, but
Mhm.
for two different audiences, right? With the same exact information in both languages, which I thought was genius. I'm like, wow, this is, because I've always had, when we do business English and Spanish, we always wonder where we're gonna get the biggest bang for our money, or where we're gonna get the biggest growth. And I can tell you, in both of them, there's bang for money in both
Mhm.
of them, and there's growth in both of them,
Okay.
right?
Yeah.
So you have to think about it in that way when it comes to that. And like right now, I'm doing a Spanish. I just started a Spanish online radio station locally for Montgomery, Alabama. The
Mhm.
reason I chose local Spanish radio and it's online is because I still can't apply for the FCC 3 mile 3 mile station, right? Because I don't have
Mhm.
all the other stuff for it. I'm working at that. But the bottom line is there is a need for that community to have
Mhm.
something in Montgomery. There's nothing in Espanol in Montgomery. Okay? But I'll still keep doing the national stuff. And I really believe that everything is local. And even these people who hit it big on YouTube are influencers. You think about how their humble beginnings before we see them as gold medalists, right? And
Mhm.
and getting all this accolade.
Notoriety. Mhm.
But everything, if you ask them, everything was local first,
Yep.
right? So that's how we have to think. We have to think local, and then it'll explode on its own if it's good enough.
Mhm.
Like the chef from last week. That man has taken off. But think about it. Everything he does is in his local area in Tampa, right?
Mhm.
So that's what I'm getting at. We sometimes we try to chew too much and not get enough. But we still, even with that said, we have to think big,
Big picture.
right?
That's right.
Growth,
That's right.
growth, because our counterparts in Anglos, that's how they think. They think when you talk to them, nosotros le decimos en español pensando en pajaritos preñados, right? It's like, but they do, but
That's right.
they take action and they convert, right?
Mhm.
And
That's
growth
right.
is what they're looking for.
That's right.
So
Felix, that's a great way to finish up your comments. Remind people we have the next guest in the queue, but remind people again where they can follow your platform. And of course, I know everybody's going to be waiting and excited for next year's Latin Podcast Awards.
Well, Latin Podcast Awards registration is available at Early Bird. We open them right after, we always do them for Hispanic Heritage Month. that's when we actually do the ceremony where we announce who the winners are. So we get excitement throughout the entire year for people who put in. And what we do is we actually market all these podcasts a lot. You know, we just do a lot of marketing. We're just like a huge marketing tool once you get on the Latin Podcast Awards. The winner for this year, for 2019, was Latino USA from NPR, won the Latin Podcast Award of the Year. We have categories where people win by categories, and we have bilingual, international. We come up with as many as awards as we can give, as long as they earn them, as long as they win them, right? But for that, you can go to Latin Podcast Awards with an S, LatinPodcastAwards.com, and all the information is there. The early bird is out, and it'll be actually at the end of the month. It's gonna go up a little bit more, because what I do is the price keeps going up every month. It keeps going up until it gets to the max price. And I gotta tell you though, price doesn't really matter, because people put in even at the end, so because they want to compete, you know.
Right.
But for people who care about price, I get more at the higher level of money than the early birds, which is crazy, but it is what it is when it comes to that. So that's LatinPodcastAwards.com. For the Audio Dice Network, you can go exactly to that, audiodice.net, or audiodice.net, which is Audio Dice. And if you want to listen to, right now it's on beta, the radio station, and I got a couple hours running on there. They're just looping. But if you want to listen to that, it's audiodice.net/ADN, Audio Dice Network.
Wonderful. Felix Montelara from the Audio Dice Network and the Latin Podcast Awards. Felix, one of my 2020 resolutions, as I shared with you as I was going onto a plane last week, is to reconnect with you, and we're going to work a lot closer together. And I think this has been a great podcast mastermind here, particularly for an emerging broadcaster like Dionelli. We have to, regardless of the project, one of the messages I want to give our family going into 2020 is we have to support raising each other's voices. We do it here. There's other ways you can do it, whether it's just helping someone support their dream, you know, whether they're doing a bake sale so they can fly somewhere because they have to compete in the competition. They're trying to raise some money for their kids' school. There's lots of ways to support each other, and Felix is leading the way in that area, especially in our broadcast content community. Dios lo bendiga, Felix. All the best to the family. We'll be in touch in 2020, my man.
Hey, amen, y just pásalo pa'lante.
Exacto. Thank you, Felix Montelara, a great friend to the show. And we're going to reset the stage, and we're going to bring on another very special guest. Only thing better than one Collazo is two. Dionelli Reyes is my brother, one of my brothers.
Wow.
Michael Collazo, who is going to be breaking it down for us in the second segment of the show. Dionelli, before we start with our politics segment, remind people again what they're listening to and how they can get engaged with the Found in Translation Talk Show.
Absolutely. You can subscribe to the Found in Translation Talk Show by liking Ray's podcast page on Facebook or YouTube, or subscribing to the Found in Translation Talk Show podcast. Anywhere you can subscribe to a podcast, like iTunes, Stitcher, Radio Public, Spotify, or Pandora. And for our radio listeners, you can also listen to Found in Translation every Tuesday at 11 a.m. on WPPM 106.5 FM in Philadelphia.
Thank you so much for joining us, Dionelli. And if you could set us up, because you're going to lead us in this conversation. If you can look at the page 2, you're going to introduce me. But before that, let's introduce the Orangeman himself, Michael Collazo.
That's correct.
Mike, you have not been on the show in quite some time, my friend.
Yeah, I think it's been, what, a year or two?
Oh, probably
maybe longer,
that, brother. It's been a minute.
Yeah.
Been a hot minute. Well, you know, you're a daddy now. You got a lot going on.
Yeah.
Another entrepreneur, hustling like a Dominican. Yeah. My man got a couple jobs in mind. Exactly. Before we get into this, Mike, share with people about your business very quickly and your social media handle before we get into the political segment. And I'm sure you'll have some things to say and ask me some questions as well.
Yeah, probably would. So, yeah, real simple. The Twitter handle is mcollazo215. I'm pretty active on there and enjoy reading and being in conversation with folks in that platform. My company's Dade, pretty simply a ticket brokerage. Always free advice if you're looking for any event around the world to see if I can help you with it. we also buy and sell tickets. So that's what I do for a living.
So Dionelli, if you're looking for like a hookup with Prince Royce one of those concerts that are hard to get sometimes, and La Última Hora, Mike is the guy to know. So Dionelli, set us up for this new segment of the show. We're going to review our 2019 news headlines.
Okay, so on this segment of Final Translation, Ray is going to break down the biggest news headlines and what they meant to us in 2019. Ray, what were the top news stories for you this year?
Well, I think, to state the obvious, this only days ago, we had the third ever impeachment of a sitting U.S. president. This really speaks to sort of the arc that we've had in our politics over the last 45 years. And I literally have seen it in my life because just months before I was born, the Republicans, and we're talking about the mid-70s, y'all. See, y'all need to start writing down some notes. I'm going to break you down a little history here. Apunta with the history. The most right-wing, Barry Goldwater. Young people don't even know that name, Barry Goldwater. Some people that were segregation. Mm-hmm. But even though there were right-wing Republicans, even though they generally supported President Nixon, they had the ethical and they cared in the Constitution to go to him and say, you got to step down because what you did was wrong. We fast forward when I'm in my early 20s. Dionelli is still a small little girl running around.
Cool. I kept asking my dad, what are they talking about? My dad's like, impeachment. He's like, I'll tell you when you're older.
Yeah, it's a little uncomfortable, right?
No.
So we go then. So we sense a Republican Party in our politics that, quite honestly, with President Clinton, obviously what he did was wrong. You don't lie to anybody. And obviously the personal stuff was unseemly. But for something relatively petty, at the end of the day, infidelity, which is a personal issue for the most part between your partner, we saw a Republican Party that got caught up in the partisan bickering, got caught up in the novella drama of our politics in this modern day, that they pushed that issue. Now we go to 2019, the end of 2019, and now we have a Republican Party that, and a big part of our American political discussion, that is critical of House Democrats and calling them radical and all these names just for simply doing the right thing and following the rules. If you use government resources to try to influence a federal election, that is as the constitutional scholars have said, that is the textbook example of how you impeach somebody, which essentially is now the House has indicted essentially the president for violations against our Constitution. It's a little different than criminal activity. And now we'll see in the Senate. So despite the assumption that the Senate's not going to do the right thing, it's still very historic, and it really speaks to the challenges we have, because behind the racial stuff, we're going to talk about that in a second. We're really talking about, are we going to have a democracy, or we're going to be like, Trujillo back in the days, or, some other dictator. And we're really fighting to hold on to what we have. So it's truly a historic moment. Dionelli, how has this whole drama with Trump impacted your thoughts about the politics and the news this year?
I just found it really interesting, and it also gives me hope and like more faith that in the end, it doesn't matter how much someone tries to gaslight a person or a society, the truth in the end always comes out, and then the truth in the end wins. So that's what I liked about it. But I still am like, I can't believe he got impeached. I'm still like, wow, December 18, 2019.
Well, and then the other thing is elections matter, right? So as we like to remind people, if it wasn't for all the work that happened with activists around the country in House district race by House district race in 2018, winning those narrow elections, winning in areas where the Democrats and our community had to outperform, vote highly and normal. There was communities, Dionelli, in this country where the Latino vote, spurned on by your generation, the millennial Latino generation, doubled their voting that they normally do in midterm elections. So that is a positive consequence, that now the fighting and being involving in a political process makes a big difference. And we just saw in Boston, Massachusetts, I don't know if you saw, Dionelli, that the first Dominicana that got elected to Boston City Council, Boston has a very large Dominican Latino community.
Yes,
she won her city council race by one vote.
It matters. Everybody
definitely matters. It definitely matters. So I'm going to get Mike back and jump in this conversation. Mike, you're back on screen, brother. Because the other thing I want to talk about, I know you have some thoughts about it, is we're still dealing with this anti-Latino sentiment. We had, unfortunately, the fracaso on the border, which has not gone away. And, it's not in the news headlines. It's very hidden, but we still have people essentially incarcerated, children incarcerated on the southern border. We have people now essentially trapped on the other side. Some people getting sent to Guatemala to apply for refugee status when they have essentially, in many ways, from a refugee perspective, sealed that border. And then we see it in and even amongst Latinos of all socioeconomic classes, getting shot down at a Walmart in El Paso, Texas, or in the street of Midland, Texas. The other day in Iowa, a Latina just walking down the street almost got run over by a white woman because she was Mexican, or she thought she was Mexican. So in the midst of this drama in the news headlines, we continue to be attacked day to day. And this language and this atmosphere has real life consequences. And this is something that I know is causing us a lot of stress. But to the positive, and I want you, Mike, to jump in on this. What have we done? What have we done to respond to our attack on our democracy and attack on our identity? Look about what's happened in Puerto Rico this year. The silent revolution. And now the dominoes that have fallen, not only in our country with activism in the States, but also in Latin America. The democratic progressive protests in Chile, Ecuador, Argentina. Bolivia has a little different flavor to it. But my point is that, there's a lot of uprisings because people are realizing that, they may be saying on the news that the economy is great, but 40% of our country makes less than $15 an hour, which we know isn't even barely enough to live, much less than minimum wage. So the atmosphere has caused us to mobilize in a way that's pretty historic. And I know, Mike, I wanted to turn to you because I know you follow this really closely, not only as an activist, but someone who has a journalism background, and sort of how the political rhetoric is impacting our community is taking a lot of very interesting turns in 2019.
Yeah, indeed. I think Puerto Rico, is an interesting test case of the perception of Puerto Rico to sort of the average American, right? We don't need a passport to go there. It's a territory of the U.S. We're not really sure why it's different than a state, but it's its own nation. It's its own country culturally in a lot of ways. They send an Olympic team, and then maybe growing up in Northeast cities, knowing who your neighbors or the neighborhood a few subway stops over and what that's about and what your perception is, right? And then fast forward to what we saw this summer, where you could argue Puerto Rico sort of gave the world a template, similar to, I guess, people would know a lot better than I or you probably, right? Sort of what we may see in Hong Kong as an example and other places like that.
That's right. Much respect to people in Hong Kong and throughout the world.
Exactly. Right. But just the test case of how Puerto Rico showed this was a nonviolent, the most violent thing they could find, like anyone could find in the stories was, a thrown bottle cap or something really, really extremely minor. How peaceful and how diligent, how dedicated this protest grew from really starting with women's-led movements and focusing on Rosselló and his reaction to domestic violence and PR and other issues, and then leading up to the Fiscal Control Board being a very difficult thing to wrap around for the average person to wrap their arms around, but then how it really became shady text by a governor and how that really galvanized, that sort of broke a straw that broke the camel's back.
Well, that's exactly what it was.
You can get this intellectual control by really understand it. You have to really read and understand what these bond holders are doing, and it's a difficult subject matter to get your hands around. But if you mess with Ricky Martin, that's the last straw.
Well, that's very true.
With an iconic person who really that is the last person on the earth you should direct any vitriol towards.
I know my mom would ready to get the chancleta.
The character of that person, forget it.
Yeah.
So if you look at all of that, I think that's really spurred what we saw was a template for a peaceful way to have your political leadership now hopefully become more accountable and to start listening to the voting electorate more.
No question about that. And I think there's two things I want to, as you wrap up the political segment and the sort of year in review, and we appreciate everyone watching the 2019 celebration edition of Founding Translation with Dionelly Reyes and my brother Michael Collazo. And thank you, Felix Montalada, for joining us earlier. We want to get to some of the fun pop culture stuff and Mike's sports review stuff in a moment. But on the political end of it, I'll say this, that I think the two most important things for people to focus on going into 2020 are two things. One is, before we get, we will see how. And I think the energy should be behind pushing the Senate to do the right thing and at the very least have a legit impeachment trial. And I think Justice Roberts is going to be a wild card because he's not going to be part of a political show. The Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, who's the judge in the trial. So that's going to be a wild card that we don't know how that's going to play out. And we have to be vigilant around that because we just can't concede that they're going to do a fraud job on us. But I think going to 2020 is very important. That if people haven't been paying enough attention, they need to be paying attention to this Democratic primary because we're about to make this decision. I mean, the reality is by mid-March, this is going to get decided most likely. And it is a little frustrating to hear from people after 6-7 months in debates and choices and all kind of people that have been in the mix that they're still not paying a lot of attention. So if you have a particular worldview about who you think this candidate should be, whether you think it should be someone that's more progressive, more moderate, someone that you really believe in, one way or another, you need to get involved now. And there's plenty of ways, whether you live in an early primary state or not, you can get involved. So that's one of my messages to people. And then the other thing is in 2020, I know there's a lot of stress around this election in November, but I think in a way you can take away from the stress because faith without words is dead. And so without deeds is dead. And so you have to make a commitment to yourself that whether it's 7 people, 18 people, 24 people, that you're going to take a personal responsibility. Dionelly, just think about the Latinos that we know in Pennsylvania alone. That if we organize them and we just made sure, okay, all of my people are going to be registered and I'm going to make sure they come out to vote, that's going to be very powerful. So I think it's very important that we take a personal responsibility in 2020 to not change the world. Focus on the people that you know, whether they're in Pennsylvania or a state like North Carolina, which has a very close Senate election, to get involved and come out and vote next year because it's going to be that kind of discipline follow-up that's going to make the difference. Dionelly, can you hear us now?
I can hear you now, yeah.
Okay. Dionelly, you have, before we go to the social media, the pop culture segment, we've talked a lot of politics on the show, and I just curious about your reflections around the news and politics that we've talked about going into this year. This is the first show that ever talked about Andrew Yang. The first show that said Bernie was going to do well. There's a lot of stuff that we've talked about here that has run true in this process.
And you met him this year.
Yes, I did. Yeah, Bernie's my buddy. Yes, we talked about Puerto Rico, and I met Julian Castro. Julian,
he needs to go.
I got a couple hours, brother.
No, I don't.
But and I know a lot of people on this campaign, of course, a lot of our friends there.
Well, that's true. Yeah.
But the other highlight was, of course, I recently endorsed Julian Castro for president. And before that, Dionelly, I met his mother, Rosie Castro, in Texas.
Wow.
So I need to tweet out that picture because that was a very special moment. She's a fantastic activist, and I thanked her for both her sons. The twins are both very prominent. So it's been we've talked it up here. Mike, any other quick political comments before we get to the fun stuff?
No, I honestly, I think we talk about it personally, but the bottom line is, listen to my older brother if you want to get a sense of what might be happening 6-8 months from now. I mean, I really believe that. We've talked, even Mayor Pete. I remember you saying, "Hey, by the way, there's this guy who's a mayor of South Bend."
One of the who else was talking about Mayor Pete?
Yeah.
And now in New York Times,
never heard of him until that.
I'm morphing into a movie character here. Yeah, this is odd. But I don't know how to change it. What are you gonna do? But exactly. But look, I mean, the bottom line is you got to pay attention. And it's gonna be really interesting because Bernie Sanders, because young people now and people of color paying a little more attention, he's rising in the polls, and there's definitely a sense from the corporate Democratic establishment, Bloomberg, Mayor Pete, somebody, because if Biden slips, they're very scared, they're very nervous about a progressive candidate winning. Most likely it would be Bernie, maybe Warren, who's also a strong candidate. So it's gonna be really interesting. That's why I'm saying it's very important. I don't care where you live. Support somebody and get engaged in this process, because what I don't want is people saying in October, I don't like this choice. It's the same old, same old. Well, what did you do to get involved? Because this is the time now to get involved. Dionelly, set up our next segment of the show.
So the next segment of the show, let's see. Let's see the next segment.
It's all about you, Dionelli. We are going to talk about in this segment of the show. And again, you're listening to Found in Translation Talk Show. Thank you so much for watching us either on Facebook Live, Twitter, or on YouTube, and of course the podcast. Mike, what podcast audio app do you use to listen to Found in Translation?
I'm a Stitcher guy personally.
You are a Stitcher guy. Very
yes,
interesting.
Sir. Yes, sir.
Very cool. Yeah. We actually have audience. The audience has grown on Stitcher, particularly because the Android crowd gets more into
that's
the podcast thing.
I do not have an iPhone, so
yeah,
Stitcher's the way to go in my sense.
Yeah, and then we definitely have heard from people that they're listening more on the music down streaming apps. So,
right. So
Pandora, Spotify. Yeah. So there's a lot of ways you can listen to the show. Mike, before we get to Dionelli's pop culture highlights of 2019, shout out. What do I want to ask you? What did I want to ask you, Mike? Well, what's another thing in the politics you've been following this year closely that you wanted to share with people, or anything else about 2019 you wanted to share?
Oh, 2019. Well, from what I do for a living, I guess I always find it interesting that, and we'll talk a little bit more about it later, but just from the world of sort of live entertainment, what a juggernaut reggaeton is. And also just in general, no, seguro, but also just the U.S. Latino ticket buying consumer and how that drives the train in virtually entire regions and major markets throughout the United States. A lot of the publicity goes to, Rolling Stones going on tour, and Elton John going on tour, and whatever genre you enjoy, your favorite artists from hip hop, from country music, what have you. But if you look at the top selling concerts, let's say, in every major market, a big chunk of it is an artist that will never be played on English language radio, will never be, or will rarely be on, say, CBS or NBC. So Luis Miguel, Mark Anthony every year. We'll see, obviously, how big Bad Bunny is, not only in the United States, but in the Americas, but also internationally, globally, how big he is. Ozuna, who will probably tour off his latest album, I would think in 2020. Maluma, all these artists, right? They drive the train. Like, who do you think is selling tickets in Miami, Florida, in a 20,000 seat venue? Who do you think is selling sellout crowds in the Rio Grande Valley in Texas, in Southern California, in Chicago, in New York City, in even cities in the Old South, which now have Latino populations?
Fayetteville, North Carolina, Columbia.
I know AA plays Duluth, Georgia, and plays, the Deep South just as he would, or Sugarland, Texas, just as he would. You would think, he's going to play Orlando, he's going to play New York. It's like, yeah, but he also plays Sugarland, Texas, and he also plays Phoenix, Arizona. So just it doesn't get talked about because the sort of the revenue per ticket is so big for what, sort of the old fogey bands sort of tours. The 55-year-old guy who likes 70s rock will go to Rolling Stones and will pay $250, $300 a seat for it. So that drives a big chunk of the revenue train of it. But you're talking about the other huge aspect of it. It's sort of like Latino market and like country music are such a huge part of like a concert going revenue, which, by the way, country music, a big chunk of the Latino community, that's part of their heritage. If you live in Southwest Texas, you live in Colorado.
Our homie David Sanchez does the Tejano Awards.
Exactly. Then you think what every year. Exactly. So you think of what hip hop is from, the Bronx. So Ricans, Dominicans, Caribbean, English speaking Caribbean cats basically are on the list of founders for that genre. So then how that drives with Cardi B now and other people, the economy of that live event world. And then obviously reggaeton, Eneje la Banda,
Bachata, which is big in the South.
Bachata,
Yeah.
yeah, Romeo Santos, whenever he does it. Aventuras on a tour now. They're doing like
Prince
5 or
Royce.
6, 8 Prince Royce, all these people.
Much.
So this is what's driving the train, and it doesn't get talked about as much because the easy names are the really big old fogies that are 60, 70 years old.
It's what the white
And
media
then-
knows. It's their comfort zone, you know.
Well, that's the thing. And even the pop, A-Link is Camila Cabello. You know, someone like that is an example.
Bruno
Being a big
Mars,
part of that. Yeah, Bruno Mars, exactly. So
let's get Dionelli back on the air here to kick off some of our pop culture stuff. Mike got us warmed up about sort of the concert version of it. But Dionelli, let's get into give us a story that you were one of the stories you were following. You wanted to discuss here, sort of our 2019 celebration in our pop culture segment.
Well, I want to start off on a happier note. Well, as he was discussing, like reggaeton artists, they're also collaborating more with Dominican artists, which the genre for the urban genre Dominican Republic is called Dembow, and there's more collaboration with Dominican. So that's something amazing and great that I love.
A lot of the reggaeton, even the Puerto Rican guys, are half Dominican. Osuna's Dominican, Nicky Jam Dominican.
Nicky Jam, yeah.
And they have the New York crowd, Messi and those guys. So Dominicans are a big part of the movement too.
Exactly. But there were also Oscar winners, Latino Oscar winners. Alfonso Cuarón, he took the award for Roma. So that was amazing. And the Cuban-American Phil Lord picked up an Oscar for bringing the story of Afro-Latino Miles Morales and Spider-Man into the Spider-Verse. So those were great things. I mean, there were also other not so positive things that happened in Latinos, but that was really like a wow moment. Like, oh my goodness, this is happening. Like, you know that Cardi B is constantly going to court appearances. But it's amazing to me how she's making.
Well, she also just bought a $10 million house. Did you see this on Instagram yesterday, Dionel?
It's fabulous. It's like it's just amazing because she's doing like all these amazing things, and then when she goes to court, it's like a fashion show. Like, what is Cardi gonna wear? Like, people are more like concerned with what she's gonna wear than the actual with what she's actually going to court for. So,
unfortunately, court with some of our Latin pop stars was too much of a part of it. Tekashi 6ix9ine, who was such an odd character. I saw this morning that the latest is that he may get out of prison Wednesday. Of course, Tekashi, the Puerto Rican Mexican rapper that looks like a toy that your kids are playing with under the Christmas tree, literally and figuratively, he looks like a little troll with a starburst coming out of his head. He was most infamously known for not only being part of this crazy gang situation, and I don't know how he's not getting out of doing more serious time. But he just ratted out. He snitched on the whole squad, basically.
He was saying like a canary. Well, he wanted to avoid the 47 years that he was facing. So now it's looking like he's only gonna do 2 years, and then he might get out sooner than that because of time served. So we'll see what happens. But it was just like he was just telling on everybody. Like, he was telling on somebody else.
Cardi.
Telling our Cardi, it's like, dude, relax.
You have no shame. You have no shame. If people know the sports journalist, he does a lot of hip hop stuff. The journalist Shea Serrano, he spent a good amount of the end of the year. He's Mexican American, begging people to trade Tekashi in the racial draft. It was really hysterical. Much love to Shea Serrano, again a Pulitzer Prize winning author. But I'm going to bring Mike back on because we're actually going to transition into someone that both of you have a lot of love for. Looking at it from different perspectives. One of the things that became a great drama that crossed even the sports world was the incredible situation that happened with Big Papi David Ortiz in the Dominican Republic. Dionelli, I know this had to be one of the top issues that impacted not only Latinos, but Dominicans. I mean, we can't go to DR to chill no more. I mean, this was some serious business to happen to Big Papi. What's going on, girl?
We absolutely can. And it's not.
Message from the Dominican Tourism Bureau.
No, that was like the whole thing with the government. We feel like it was like the government trying to get people to stop going to DR and go somewhere else instead. But it's really not like a lot of the news reports. If you look into it, like, oh, tourists died, but they died back like in 2009. So they were reported like they were in the date that it happened. But they was like putting all these reports out, and then turns out, they died of natural causes and other things like that. But if they're just like telling you this person died in the Dominican Republic, this person died, yeah, but it was like in the past 20 years. and it's not really that dangerous. And then
Right.
David Ortiz, that was like an isolated issue, which is still very mysterious. There's still a lot of things that people don't know. And they try to say, oh, they put a hit out on him. Like, he doesn't even really want to talk about it and give details. Like, we're just so happy and grateful that he's okay. But la mala lengua, they say
Right.
it was, so that's what they're saying. It's not confirmed, but allegedly that maybe there was like a drug lord in the Dominican Republic that put out a hit on him because it was jealous because he was dating
Compró un Lexus.
one of his girls.
That's
It's like, really? All this over a woman? But that's alleged. Nothing's proven.
Right. Exactly.
Still under investigation.
At all.
I'm just glad that he's okay. But it's like, really? He really thought whoever put the hit out on him or whatever, they really thought they were going to get away with it?
You know,
Come
Mike,
on.
from a baseball perspective, it was I don't know. Is there a precedence in baseball? Because there's been guys that have died tragically, of course, Clemente or
Honestly,
Thurman Munson, Kirby Puckett.
right.
But I mean, this was high drama, brother.
To be honest with you, the only comparison I had was Clemente's tragic death, if he had passed away, obviously. And I think that's the only comparison. A figure that big and so iconic from the nation that he came from, whence he came, sort of like obviously a beloved figure that was someone to be admired, someone that was sort of a symbol of the culture of Dominican Republic, particularly as it relates to obviously the legacy of Dominance in baseball. And for him to pass away, I mean, thank goodness he didn't. But for him to pass away, there would have been no other precedent, in my view, than literally Lou Gehrig in baseball history going way back, and then Roberto Clemente going into the 1970s, and then if that were to happen. But as Dionelli said, this sort of mysterious, rumor-filled story around it was sort of added to the drama. This idea that, you know, why would Big Papi be a target, or was this really a mistake? And then this unfortunate knee-jerk reaction, which I always like in these sort of stories, and how it impacts like people's perception versus the reality of, you know, shark deaths. Like, shark deaths are extremely rare. It happens like once every year and a half, you know. But if it does happen, it's such an emotional, unusual, shocking thing that the perception is, oh, we have to do something about sharks and they're super dangerous. Like, nah, you drive to school every day. That's much more dangerous by exponentially. And so the Dominican Republic, there isn't a huge, they don't have this, in the case of like tourism compared to other parts of the Americas, let's say, it doesn't have this unusually high death rate compared to any other, you know, country or in the Caribbean or in the Americas to you know, compared to somewhere in Florida, it would, you know. But Big Papi almost got shot in a bar to death. And now we have to worry about, we should never go to the Dominican Republic. And then we had some other stories that sort of helped compound it, I guess, unfortunately.
And of course, you know, I've been to the Dominican Republic a few times. I encourage people to continue to go. And, you know, Big Papi in the same year made a big comeback, was part of the World Series crew, and he looks great. And from, you know, we do have a couple personal connections to David Ortiz from a health perspective. Apparently he's doing well. So we're really happy that David is a survivor. When we get another time, because we don't have time right now, but the phenomenon of Alex Rodriguez being such a national brand to me is something we have to,
for this stronger national brand all of a sudden, over the last few years.
Yeah. What do you think, Dionelli?
I think him dating J-Lo helped a lot, you know, because J-Lo, she's a great businesswoman and she knows how to like use the media and use social media in her favor. And I think that helped a lot. I mean, he's extremely talented. I'm very proud of him. Ay, Dios mío, Dominicans, yes.
I want to ask you, Washington Nationals, the World Series champions, were very much kind of like very much indicative of kind of where the country is in many ways. Their stars were a mix of older white players who kind of come from the old school tradition of baseball, a very young mix of Latino stars, capped off by Juan Soto, the latest Dominican young phenom, extremely young.
Tremendous player.
And then the other star player, arguably the best player on the team, a Mexican-American, Anthony Rendon, that, you know, his identity as a Latino, sort of an afterthought. But him and the manager, Puerto Rican manager, David Ortiz, sort of guys that bridge the American and Latino baseball cultures. And that was a big part of the vibe. And of course, the song Calma was indicative of that. So, Mike, quickly, and I know Dionelli has some thoughts, particularly about Juan Soto that you want to share. But, Mike, how did the Washington Nationals sort of were a symbol of sports from our perspective in 2019?
Yeah, indeed. So you alluded to the demographic of the team, let's say. So a lot of the names people would know were the veterans, were the starting rotations, the older guys, Matt Scherzer, Steven Strasburg. They were sort of seen as the pillars. But think of the United States and how people may not always realize how the younger Latino demographic is such a big piece of the pie now in terms of young people under 25, let's say. So you have the veteran starting rotation. You have Bryce Harper, who moves on for $1 more to our beloved Phillies. And people think, oh, they must not have a chance in 2019 because their best player, supposedly their best player, just got up and left. They've always had bullpen issues. The Atlanta Braves were good and up and coming, but their young Latino leadership, so Juan Soto, Victor Robles being the big two, they would become quickly the mainstay on the team, particularly Soto. And this perception versus reality we talked about, the perception was that Bryce Harper was the best player in the Nationals. But outside of his MVP year, about a handful of years ago, if you look at it, and if you watch the Nationals almost every day, like I would as a fan of the National League East, Anthony Rendon has been their best player for the last 5 years. He's the most consistent.
A Latino from Houston, Texas.
And just a Mexican-American cat from Houston who, if you interview him, you read that his teammates will tell him this guy thinks in his brain he's in the NBA because he loves basketball so much. Yeah. But as a talent, he was just better in baseball. So that's why he stuck with it beyond high school. So Anthony Rendon was always their best player, always was, despite Bryce Harper being sort of the poster child for a young MLB media attractive star. And just the run they made, they were 19-31 in May. It looked like the bullpen was going to sink them. It looked like Dave Martinez was a bad manager, which, by the way, bad managers turn into good managers when your team is good in most cases. So it wasn't Dave Martinez's fault that they were bad. They weren't as good in 08. It was because now it was the talent. And just how the Nationals sort of resurrected themselves from that bad start, Rendon and Soto being really two huge reasons why offensively. And if we remember the postseason, just how dynamic they were. And even the role player component, we could talk about it as a symbol of American society. We don't talk about how immigrants, even if the immigrant is, they got an HB1 visa and they work at a tech company, that's the one people love to talk about as sort of the number one reason why this is so great. But we don't talk about the guy that started in the back of a kitchen and built a restaurant, now owns 2 in a small city somewhere. And so the Latino immigrant demographic of, again, Soto and Robles, but on the older end, Gerardo Parra, who was sort of seen as a utility figure. He's a backup, he's not a starter, but he's like a good team player type guy. And then he struggled going into July. Then all of a sudden he played Baby Shark and breaks out of a slump. Baby Shark becomes the other big song in that run of the Nationals. And he was really a sort of an unsung role player that every Major League Baseball team needs to win, and America needs too.
Dionelli, one of the things that was really nice to see was that during the World Series, Alex Rodriguez and David Ortiz would come on the field and take pictures of Juan Soto, the next generation of Dominican stars. So I know seeing that connection between the generations and Dominican ballers passing it on to the next generation of Dominican ballers, I know in the Dominican community was a big highlight for sure.
Most definitely. We're just always so proud. Like they say baseball is the American sport, but for Dominicans it's like it's next level. And I really appreciate how MLB is doing. They're really trying to show how baseball has evolved, like old school to new school. Like if you look at the commercial that they showed back in October of this year, We Play Loud. They showed images of, the old school baseball players and now the younger baseball players. A lot of them are, Dominicans and other Latinos. and they played a song. Oh, we went crazy. Dominicans, we went crazy because it's the Dominican Dembow song from El Lápiz Musicólogo. So that was amazing to us. It's great how they're bridging the gap.
Well, that is awesome. And I know, Mike, quickly, one of the things that sort of turning to the NFL very quickly is that we started the year with Pat Mahomes coming literally a finger away from getting to the Super Bowl. And then we're ending the year with Lamar Jackson, a guy that couldn't have done anything else to prove his greatness in college, winning a Heisman Trophy, but being passed over for 5 white quarterbacks who didn't do a half of what he accomplished in college, now dominating the NFL. When we were kids, Mike, the question around can a black quarterback or an athletic quarterback, quote unquote, lead the charge with Randall Cunningham, who was one of the great talents, still one of the great talents. And in 2019, going to 2030, we're still dealing with these issues. But while people are still trying to, justify making certain decisions, Lamar Jackson is going to run away with the MVP of the NFL. It's unbelievable.
Yeah, indeed. You have to give credit to the Ravens organization and Coach Harbaugh there, because so much of the NFL is about let's put the player in a system and we'll try to pick the person that fits in our system and will thrive in our system. But in that draft, he obviously decided Lamar Jackson is a tremendous talent, and he has shown dedication and diligence to say, I will remain a quarterback and I will succeed as a quarterback. And he's made plays on the collegiate level. He can throw, he can run. So why don't we adjust our offense and our system to a guy who has some talent, and let's go that route. Let's go invest in the talented guy instead of the talented guy investing in us in a lot of ways. And that's what I liked about what the Ravens did. And we remember how we would get frustrated how the Eagles didn't do that enough in the Randall Cunningham era in the late 1980s, early 90s, where we were trying to impose this, system, or just give them a football and don't give him a running game and give him a weak, wide receiver core, and just he'll figure it out, and then the defense will do the rest of the work. When the more effective way to go about it was, we have Randall Cunningham with all his talent, so why don't we construct an offense that will maximize the talents he has? So I think the NFL of Patrick Mahomes and Lamar Jackson, that's just 2 good examples of how Jackson in particular, how the best organizations adjust and get the best out of the talent that they receive.
As we wrap up the sports segment of the show, I wanted to quickly note as well that the impact of women in sports was also something very interesting. Of course, the World Cup, Women's World Cup, which is an amazing phenomenon. I want to shout out, she's one of my favorites, a little obscure. But do you know Dionelli, one of the top women tennis ping pong players in the world, is an 18-year-old Puerto Rican female, Adriana Torres, who can't afford sometimes to go to some of the international tournaments in Asia. So earlier this year, Daddy Yankee paid for her expenses to go to China because, of course, the great ping pong players tend to be Asian. So she has, every time she has to go to Hapong or China, some of the reggaeton guys, some of the celebrities pitch their pennies together to get her those flights. So she is a factor in next year's Olympics, which is all the conversation. Much respect to all of our women involved in sports on every level, our Latina runners in the community to everywhere else. Mike, any other thoughts about things you're looking out for in the ticket world? I know the boxing piece is interesting. Canelo's still the biggest box office, but we can't seem to get actually the best fighters together with Crawford, Spence, and some of these other sexy matchups that we like to see. And anything else you'd like to that you're thinking about going into 2020?
No, as with Canelo, I think stepping back a little bit, he's really driving the train of the boxing business in a lot of ways. He and Golden Boy signed with DAZN, which is an upstart sports premium channel, essentially, where you can stream online, and it's an international product. The fact that they picked Canelo to be its first major investment to drive eyeballs to their, paid service, where he got an 11-fight deal, made over $380 million, something in that number. That shows you how much Canelo drives that business, not only in the United States, not only in Mexico or Latin America, but an international brand investing in that fighter, assuming he can be an international star in that particular sport. I think that's very significant. And in 2020, I would think he'll, with every great Mexican or Mexican-American fighter, if you're the elite guy, I'm assuming they'll try to get a big fight around Cinco de Mayo weekend, and it'll probably be in Las Vegas or Los Angeles. That's usually the easy calculus. And then you do Independence, Mexican Independence in mid-September. That didn't quite match up this year as cleanly as it normally does. I think that Kovalev fight was in November, for instance, this past November. But regardless, that's pretty much what you would see with Canelo. And hopefully, as you said, we can get maybe the fight we really, really want. Maybe an Errol Spence or Terrence Crawford or somebody that, even though the politics may not seem to fit, hopefully at some point it does. I think with live events, you're talking about Osuna with the new album, as I mentioned, so I'm assuming he'll just tour off that. Mark Anthony tours every year. He's got his Valentine's Day slate as normal. There's the 13th in MSG. There's the 15th in Newark, New Jersey, the building from which I once worked, at which I once worked. Then you have just a slate where probably in mid-December he played Coliseo, Puerto Rico. Mm-hmm. And I'm curious to see what we'll see in reggaeton, the other artists. So Bad Bunny finishing up this leg of the tour, and then would he do a second leg? Would he team up with somebody to do a tour? Will he tour in 2020 period? Any other artists? I'm curious. You see Dionelli in the Dominicano artist world is El Alfa. El Alfa is sort of an emerging figure. Yep. And it's sort of like I'll sell the nightclubs out, I'll hit that, and I'll play Punta Cana y como eso. But I wonder. Yeah,
well, the Dembo artists take it to the next level, like Alpha and some of those guys. That'll be really interesting.
About Nadi Natasha, can she do a tour, or El Alfa as example? Just give me two sort of Dominican artists.
I think
they can do the Americas, but can they do the U.S. and bigger venues outside of a nightclub?
They're doing that now. Like El Alfa's doing that now. But one of the things is like in Dominican Republic, there's a lot of talent, but there's also that immigration piece. Like a lot of them don't have the visa, or it's like really restricted. Like, okay, you got to be here. You could only do that for this amount of time. You got to come right back. So,
right. And it's the real world issues of that.
And we're so appreciative of, especially Puerto Rican artists, collaborating with Dominican artists and doing them both.
No question about it, Mike. We appreciate you jumping on, and let people know again where they can tap into your services for ticket brokering, or just hear your opinions on what's going on here.
Yeah, my Twitter handle is mcoyaso215. You can go to dahday.com, dade.com. You can just hit me up on my Twitter handle. It's more than fine. Free advice on any tickets someone's trying to invest in. That's pretty much what I always say. Just reach out. If I can't give you a better deal, I'll tell you where to get it. Pretty simple.
And thank you, Mike. And now people know where I get the ideas for my topics for the show, because what happens, Dionelli, is 2-3 times a week, Mike texts me in the morning about what's going on with the politics. I'm like, oh, this is what Mike wants to talk about. Then that's probably what everyone else is thinking about. So appreciate you, brother.
Sorry.
Thank you for
some of it's my fault. Yeah, you got it.
Giving us the inspiration, brother. And, all the best. I'll see you soon. Okay, thank you, brother. So thank you, Mike Collazo. Dionelli, before we wrap up the show, there was
one more highlight.
Yes, throw it in there, girl. Jump in there.
Highlight in pop culture, you guys. Jarrell Jerome made history when he became both the first Afro-Latino and the first Dominican to win an acting Emmy for Best Lead Actor in a limited series on Netflix, When They See Us. You remember what that's based on, right?
Oh, yeah. No, that was Central Park 5. To be honest with you, it was hard for me to watch it because I was a little kid when that all went down, and I get so mad to watch it.
Donald Trump wanted them to get the death penalty. So imagine if that would have gone through.
Oh, yeah, no. And even after they were exonerated, he was putting out full-page ads. So it's a very important documentary or program. I encourage you to watch it. Dionelli, we go into 2020. What else is on your mind? What are you looking forward to? I know that there's so much in store, positive, and a lot of challenges, but a lot of things to look forward to in 2020.
Yeah, so I'm following in your footsteps. I really thank you. The words thank you is not enough for me to show you how much I appreciate you believing in me and bring me onto your show, and also, dándome la patica de buena suerte, like to go on and do my own thing too. But I'm looking forward to that, and I'm looking forward to so much. It's just, staying positive, having faith, and keeping it going. And then what's going to happen with the impeachment and everything, how everything's going to unravel and what else is going to come out. Because I'm sure this is only the beginning of everything unraveling for Donald Trump.
No, there's no question about that. And I think one of the things I'm really looking forward to is to see women, especially your generation, Dionelli, of young, diverse women, really take more leadership and step into the fore. I'm thinking about, what we saw a few years ago, the impact of AOC and that generation of women getting involved in politics and in leadership and culture. I mean, as far as I'm concerned, she's the one that put Bernie Sanders back in this game with that endorsement. She's been campaigning with him the last several days in California. She did a Spanish language town hall for him in Las Vegas. I mean, he is just the interest of the Latino community is really zooming up because of her. I think in large part co-signing on him. So we're going to see other names. There's a name, Julissa Ramos, South Texas, running for Congress. Our great friend who's running, 34-year-old Latina, young mother. You heard it here first, Dionelli. Cristina Zinzur Ramirez, running for U.S. Senate in Texas.
Wow, yeah.
Oh, you thought Beto got people hype in Texas. Wait until my homegirl. I was just with her. Her campaign manager is a very good friend of mine, David Sanchez. He's going to come on the show in the new year to talk about that campaign. I was just with them in Washington, D.C. She is leading in the polling, and she is causing so much that the Democratic Party is trying to figure out they can't control her because she is dynamic and she is breaking all the rules. A young Latina single mother is not supposed to do this, and she is going to make history. No question about it. Julissa, we've got a lot of women that are out there. My friend Crisanta Duran running for Congress in Colorado. A lot of exciting other leaders that are going to come into the fore. I'm also curious to see how women in our culture. Obviously, Cardi, J-Lo may have an Oscar nomination for Hustlers. That's going to be
amazing. Wow,
isn't that incredible? In the Heights is going to be coming out as a movie.
You know what I love? What I feel that like growing up, women. Well, what I would see is like women would compete with each other. Like if machismo was still really strong, but now it's not so much. Like there's no need to compete anymore. Like let's all come together. Let's empower each other. El pastel da para todo. The pie is big enough for everybody. So I love that we're doing that we're focusing on things that actually matter.
Absolutely. No. So I think there's a lot of exciting things coming up. And I want to thank you, Dionelli, for, I appreciate you thanking me, but let me tell you, I mean, I see a talent and I see one that has a passion for it. All I'm doing is being a mirror to show you what you're capable of. And as I share with you, Cristina Vega, who I want to really shout out as well, what that young woman has done. I don't know if you saw that Cristina Vega, the founder of the Love Shouldn't Hurt movement, a support group for Latina domestic violence survivors. She has been invited to Hawaii to go speak, to do a keynote address,
so proud of her.
To share her vision, share her documentary. So we're going to see her more on the show this year in 2020. And we're going to find other people like the Cristinas, like the Dionellis, to highlight what they're doing. My homie Edwin Desamore with his activism, with his small business work. Our homie Joel Beracol, you did the show with. I was just with him recently. We're going to highlight more small business owners. And one of the things I'm going to really focus on is how can I make Dionelli some money this year? How can I make Edwin some money this year? How can I help Cristina grow her nonprofit this year? We need to continue that, and I think Felix and others are going to help us do that. Dionelli, thank you so much. It's been a great ride in 2019. I'm so glad we got to connect and build on our friendship here. Shout out to our mutual friend, Cyril Rivera, who I was just with, who we need to get on the show, who's now running our own organization. And so there's lots of wonderful things happening with our friends that we need to continue to support. Any other final thoughts, Dionelli, on this 2019 edition of Found in Translation?
Can I remind people where they could watch and listen?
Please do so.
Okay. I want to remind people they are watching and listening to Found in Translation talk show. For our live listeners, please keep commenting and joining the show. We want to hear your thoughts on 2019, the new year. And you remember, you could also tune into us on WPPM 106.5 FM in Philadelphia.
That was a big 2019 highlight for us that we debuted right at the end of 2018 on WPPMLP 106.5 FM. Shout out to Vanessa Maria Graber, the executive producer of the radio station there, who was the executive producer of the radio version of the show.
I'm so passionate about it. It's amazing how when you put passion and work ethic together, amazing things happen. Vanessa's
a hustler, and we're going to be, Felix has offered to simulcast the show on his network in Alabama. We have a few other platforms that we're looking to distribute the show. So I think that the show's only going to grow with people like you, Dionelli, and the rest of our familia. Like I like to say, Mike, people are like, how do you know all these amazing people? I'm like, because you have to open your heart up to people. You have to share. And it goes to the point you share so eloquently, Dionelli, is that there's so much. We're only going to grow more together. And I think that's the thing going into 2020, despite our challenges. Dionela Jerez, thank you, mija. Enjoy your holidays. Enjoy your new year.
And getting over this cold.
Get over the cold. I know you've been on your fitness journey as well, and we appreciate you opening up about that part of your journey. And I know nothing but the best for you. But get over this cold so you can enjoy your New Year's, girl. I know you want to have some fun. You deserve it. You work hard. Thank you so much for joining the Founders Translation, familia. Enjoy your 2019. Y felicidades, familia. Peace.
Everyone.